Happy Thursday! Hey, this week we are talking about gaslighting at work, part 2, how to confront your gaslighter. Are you ready? Gaslighting is when someone is trying to talk you out of your version of reality. They're trying to make you feel a little bit crazy and they're trying to make you doubt yourself. Last week we talked about the first piece of managing gaslighting at work, which is managing in. How to manage inward during those times when someone is trying to throw you off your game intentionally. But this week we're doing the work of managing out. And that means dealing with the gaslighter head on. When we confront a gaslighter at work, it has to be done, carefully. And there are 3 components that I want to share with you. First thing I like to do as a way of slowing down the action is I like to call a time out. And I literally will do this, like, whoa, time out, time out. And what this gesture does is the same kind of thing, when they're filming a movie and the director yells, cut, and everybody relaxes and falls out of their roles for a minute and resets. That's what calling a timeout in a conversation will do. And with a gaslighter, it's priceless because they're trying to create momentum around whatever narrative they're spinning. By calling a timeout, you stop the action and create just enough space to reassert what your version of reality is. I remember one time I was being gaslit by someone, and she was trying to get me to expand the scope of work that I had committed to in ways that didn't make any sense at all and that were making me feel crazy. I was like, wait a minute, I was hired to do X and Y and Z, and she's asking for A and B and C as if it were part of the original agreement, which it wasn't. So as she was spinning and talking fast, and of course you're gonna do this, that's what any self-respecting communication coach would do in this situation. And I was like, am I crazy or is she crazy? So in those moments when she would try and spin me up fast so that I would lose my footing in a conversation, I would say, whoa, time out, time out. My understanding is that I was hired to do X and Y and Z, but you're now adding A and B and C. That doesn't make sense to me. Where is this coming from? And if you're like, who is this creature in this video that's making all this sound? It's my dog. So by calling a time out, you are stopping the action and you're able to hold up a mirror to the gaslighter so that they can see what's actually going on in that moment. Because here's the thing to know about gaslighters. They are masters at casting a spell on us. And that spell is to get us to question ourselves, our decisions, our choices. By calling a timeout, you break that spell temporarily. Now, they may recast it, and you may have to call another timeout, but by doing this, you create a break in the action. The spell is suspended long enough for you to assert what your understanding is. Now, here's the thing. 99.999% of the time, this is all it takes. Because once a gaslighter realizes that you are not F-with-able, they tend to leave you alone. Obi-Wan Kenobi say in Star Wars, like, the weak-minded are very susceptible to the Force, right? Gaslighters know that the weak-minded are easy to manipulate. And so by calling a timeout and reasserting what your version of reality is, you are demonstrating you are not weak-minded. No way. So call a time out. I find that the timeout works absolutely fantastically. In gaslighting situations where someone is lying, I love calling a timeout and being like, wait, I'm sorry, time out for a second. Just 2 days ago, you said X, but now you're saying Y. What happened? I love that phrase, timeout, statement, what happened? It's a very neutral way of calling someone out on something without looking like you're spoiling for a fight. You know when else this works really, really great? Is when the gaslighter keeps changing the rules of engagement. That is a classic move of a gaslighter at work. You agree to one thing, but then that thing changes 100 times. And before you know it, you're like, how the hell did we get here? How did I suddenly find myself in charge of all these 25 things when I was really brought in for these 5? Also, timeouts are super powerful when you are being spoken over, when someone is actively ignoring you in a conversation. I remember I was in a meeting with a very, very high up executive, and she was actively ignoring me. She didn't like my point of view for whatever reason. There's a whole backstory to that too. But I was there to represent that point of view. I was being paid to represent that point of view. It was the role I was playing in the room. And she kept ignoring me, as if I literally wasn't there. My perspective was on mute. This was back when we were in person. I was not on mute, okay? And in that moment, I said, whoa, 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 time out. I'm confused because I've made this point a couple of times. And it's fine if people disagree with me. That's absolutely understandable. But we're not engaging on the point I would like to engage on. What's going on? And then people have to deal with me. Number 2, give direct feedback if you can. Sometimes gaslighters don't really even realize they're doing it. They don't have that self-awareness. If you can get them alone, just one-on-one, not in front of other people, not with an audience, because that would make them feel exposed and defensive, but get them one-on-one and say, hey, would you be open to some feedback? Would you be open to some feedback? Because I'm noticing X and Y and Z, and I have a perspective that might be helpful. Now, here's why this is powerful. This allows an unconscious gaslighter, someone who doesn't realize the damage they're doing, the space and the grace to be able to say, oh, yeah, actually, I am open to feedback. That is such an opportunity because, listen, we've all been the gaslighter at some point. Anytime we have tried to cover our own tracks or told something that wasn't entirely true for the sake of covering our own tushes, that's gaslighting too. We have all been there. I find that extending the grace to someone to privately share what I'm observing in a kind way, in a way that it makes them feel supported and not persecuted or accused, it's powerful. In that space of one-on-one, you can say, hey, look, I observed that when you sort of publicly humiliate people, it doesn't get the same kind of results as providing feedback one-on-one. Would you be open to giving feedback in a more private environment instead of putting everybody on blast? Which, by the way, is a classic gaslight move. So ask the gaslighter if they'd be open to direct feedback. If your gaslighter says, no, I'm not open to feedback, this is something that needs to be documented. In business, it is absolutely assumed that you, as a part of a functioning team, must be open to feedback. It's baseline. It's like basic business 101. If someone tells you, no, thank you, I do not want your feedback, that needs to be documented. It needs to be shared with human resources if that's the way your organization is set up. It needs to be shared with somebody who can provide some support, because that is someone who is uncoachable, who is unfeedbackable, and who is a one-person wrecking ball on a team. Ask if they're open to feedback. If they say no, document it. If they say yes, give them the feedback. Start with the positive, give them the constructive, end with the positive, and see what their reaction is. If after giving the feedback, they dismiss it and say, you know what, you're just being too sensitive. Like, oh my God, give me a break. Reassert your point, but gently, right? Yeah, I can understand why you would say that and why it would seem that I'm being sensitive. But what I've observed is that X behavior has Y consequence, and it's something you should know about. It's something you should consider. Don't let them talk you out of your point of view, but don't crumble or take it personally or get angry if they don't accept your feedback, but do find a way to gently reassert it. That's another way of signaling I am not weak-minded. You cannot pull your Jedi mind tricks on me. Number 3, establish and uphold your boundaries. I one time had a client that was masterful at crossing my boundaries without me even realizing it. She was so adept at moving the goalpost, so to speak. It was like Lucy in the football, you know, when Charlie Brown like winds up and he's about to kick the football and she whips it away from him at the last minute and he goes upside down. That was me and this woman. She just kept moving the goalpost. Part of my job was to actively manage my boundaries, right? It's not the gaslighter's job to manage your boundaries. That's your job. So part of it is like getting clear. Are you clear on what your roles and responsibilities are? Are you crystal clear about what the priorities are? And then number 2, How able are you to manage those boundaries, to uphold those boundaries? And for me, I love a good script. My favorite script for upholding a boundary is to say, listen, I totally understand why X is a priority. I get it. Notice how I'm validating. I'm not rejecting, I'm validating first. Totally understand why X is a priority. Given that my main focus, however, is Y, I need to keep my focus there. So what you're doing is you're not just saying, I don't do that. What you're saying is, I get why you're coming to me with this. And I also have to keep my priority in mind. So let's solve it together. So establish your boundaries and uphold your boundaries. Just to recap, here is how you confront them. Number one, you call a timeout. You reassert what your understanding of reality is and ask them to engage with you on your version of reality, not just theirs. Give direct feedback privately. And before you give it, ask for permission. If they don't give you permission, document it. Get some outside perspective. Establish and uphold your boundaries. And if you don't know what your boundaries ought to be, that's got to happen first. Understanding what your own boundaries is the only way you'll be able to uphold any boundaries. So now you've got some moves. Now you don't have to be blindsided. Now you have some strategy. Hey, if you found that helpful, hit the like button and subscribe and leave me a comment. I love hearing your stories. I love hearing what's working, what's helpful, or what you're struggling with. And of course, you can always find me on the socials, which are listed below. And shine on. We need your light. I'll see you next week.